Hi, my name is Landon Armstrong. I'm a professional illustrator with over 15 years experience, and today I am going to go over my workspace setup and how to set up custom quick keys in Photoshop. Let's get started. Again, I just want to say there's no right or wrong way to do this. This is just a workspace that works for me after years of working in Photoshop and other digital painting programs that I feel complements my workflow. So I suggest you explore and find out what works for you. Now, Photoshop comes with pre-made workspaces. If you go up to the Window drop-down menu and go to Window Workspace, you'll see a bunch of options available, including one for painting. My workspace is very similar to the painting preset. I just like to keep different windows expanded due to my workflow and what tools I use. Up here in the top left-hand corner is the Tool Presets window. The Tool Presets window is where you keep custom settings for whatever tool you have selected currently. Right below that I have my color sliders. I prefer the huge saturation brightness color sliders. And then below that I have custom swatches. Here on the right is my tool palette. I usually leave that floating and just keep that out of the way. Next to that are my brush settings palette and my brush palette. For the most part, I just use the stock brushes that come from Photoshop. There are certain circumstances where I make my own. I also have a couple custom brushes that I use for laying out typography and adding distressing effects for apparel pieces. Up here in the top right is No Man's Land. I mainly have the adjustments panel open here since I use a lot of layer adjustments when I do my digital illustration, but also keep my path palettes and any other palettes that come up maybe once in a while during a piece. Then below that I have my layers and channel windows and my history palette and my action palette. And that's it. Next, let's talk about keyboard shortcuts. I primarily work on a Mac, and to find the keyboard shortcuts, go up to Edit, and then from the drop-down menu go down to Keyboard Shortcuts. When you select Keyboard Shortcuts, this dialog box will appear. I believe it by default opens up in the Tools section. Scroll through the Tool menu until you find the tool that you want to assign a quick key to. Then using your keyboard, press whatever key you want to assign. If there's a conflict, it will let you know and then you can address it. If you want to assign a keyboard shortcut to a menu action rather than a tool, just go up to this drop down menu right here and you can select your panels menu or your applications menu and find whatever menu command you're looking for through there. After you have assigned all your keystrokes to the proper menu actions and tool presets, hit accept in the top right hand corner and you are good to go. Now I'm going to go over some of my custom quick key setups and tools that I use to help speed up my workflow. My custom quick key setups are not too different from the Photoshop standard, but I do have a couple tools that I prefer to have available over standard Photoshop tools. First up is the smudge tool. I switched out the smudge tool with the crop tool. I rarely have to use the crop tool while I'm working on a piece, and so I just found it more practical to, if in the rare chance that I do use it, pull it from the tool menu. So yeah, C for my smudge tool. Why I prefer to have the smudge tool over the crop tool is the smudge tool is a blending brush for me. I have two main brushes that I use. I have a basic, which kind of like smears and drags the pixels along and is really great at adding some airbrush effects and doing some blending and cutting in. And then the other is the rough smudge, which acts more like a traditional painting blending tool. And that gives me a nice oil fill and has a really great texture to it. And I really like working with those two. So again, I got rid of the crop tool, don't use it that often, and replaced it with my smudge tool. Next, I replaced the gradient shortcut G with the mixer brush. The mixer brush is a great tool, and just like the smudge tool, I use the mixer brush like a blender. You can see as I go over some of the sections on this hair how well it does at blending and mixing colors together. Now, why do I need two blenders since I already use the smudge tool for a lot of my blending? One downside to the mixer brush is that whenever you use the mixer brush over any pixel that has any bit of transparency at all, you will get an undesirable repeating effect. So whenever I'm working on an edge or working with pixels that are next to transparent pixels, I use the smudge tool. And whenever I'm working on a completely opaque layer, I use the mixer brush. And again, the gradient tool is a tool that I do not use often. That's why I switched out the shortcut for the mixer brush. And if I ever need the gradient tool, I select it directly off the tool palette. The next keyboard shortcut I use is for flip canvas horizontally, and I map that to Command F. Now the reason that you want to do this goes back to a technique that was starting to be developed in the Renaissance. And after working on a piece for a short while, you tend to get lost in the details, and it helps to step back and take a look and reevaluate things. Well, flipping the canvas does this instantly. In the Renaissance times, the masters would take their artwork and look at it in a mirror, and looking at the reflection, they'd be able to tell, oh, my composition is off, oh, my anatomy is off. It would immediately point out areas that they need to address. It had a similar effect of like when you stop working on a piece, go to bed, wake up the next morning and look at it with fresh eyes. Well, now you're able to do it instantly. So I make it a practice to flip every couple minutes and to just judge how my piece is going. This is a very important part of my illustration process, and I suggest you add it to your own. Next, I'm going to show you the freeform pen tool and the regular pen tool. I have the freeform pen tool mapped to O and the normal pen tool mapped to P. I map the freeform pen tool to O just to keep it in close proximity to P, which is the standard quick select key for the pen tool. I use the pen tools frequently due to the stroke path option, which allows me to get precise lines in Photoshop. To stroke your path with the brush tool, while having the pen tool selected, right-click and go down to the stroke path or stroke subpath option. This will bring up a little dialog box, and in the dialog box you select which tool you want to run along the path and whether or not you want to simulate pressure, and press OK. And this will take whatever brush you have currently selected and run it along all the active paths in your Photoshop workspace. After you do this initially through the right-clicking method, if you want to do a shortcut for running your brush tool along a path, while you have active paths in your workspace, select your brush tool and then press the enter button, and every time you press the enter button, it's going to stroke your brush along the path. One final note: once you develop a workflow using custom keyboard shortcuts, and again, I suggest this is all going to take exploration on your part, and the more that you practice in Photoshop or any type of drawing program, the more you're going to figure out what process works best for you and what tools work best for you. Keep that workflow going throughout whatever graphical programs you end up using down the road. I bounce between Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, and Clip Studio Paint a lot in my workflows, and so bouncing back and forth between so many programs, I try to map my keyboard shortcuts to at least similar tools in each program. So when I am looking for a lasso selection tool, or if I'm looking for my brush, if I'm looking for my blender, whatever tool I'm looking for, I have that consistency and that muscle memory to be, oh, I always have a blender brush on G, or I always have my smudge tool on C, my zoom tool is Z, my brush tool is B. Try to develop these habits and take them into whatever drawing program you use in the future. Again, this is something you're going to develop over time and as you build your skills and develop your workflows while working, but keeping a consistency in your keyboard shortcuts is going to do nothing but benefit you in the future, no matter what graphics program you decide to use. Well, this is all I have on my Workspace workflow and keyboard shortcuts for today. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, if you're one of my students, contact me through Canvas. If you found this randomly on the internet, you could always reach me through my website, landonarmstrong.com. Give me a follow on Instagram, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.